Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. Have you ever shared something exciting with someone only to watch it fall apart afterward? Certain plans, dreams, and breakthroughs seem to slip away the moment you talk about them. There is immense power in silence, especially when it comes to the things God reveals to you. Not everything you see, hear, or understand is meant to be shared. When God places a vision, a dream, or a promise in your heart, it is sacred. Oh, it is sacred. It's a seed that needs to be nurtured and protected, not exposed to the harsh elements of public scrutiny. Silence is a strategic tool that can either make or break the fulfillment of what God has shown you. When you receive a revelation from God, the natural impulse is to share it with others, to seek validation, to celebrate it, or to get advice. But sometimes that very act of sharing can cause the seed to die before it even has a chance to grow. This is because not everyone is meant to know what God is doing in your life. Some people, even those close to you, might not understand the depth of what you've received. They may project their fears, doubts, or insecurities onto your vision, causing you to second guess what God has spoken. Others may respond with jealousy or skepticism, which can create unnecessary resistance and confusion. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He had a powerful dream from God about his future greatness. In his excitement and innocence, he shared the dream with his brothers. But instead of rejoicing with him, they became envious and plotted against him. His brothers' jealousy led to Joseph being thrown into a pit and sold into slavery. Joseph's mistake wasn't hearing from God. It was revealing the vision prematurely to people who couldn't handle it. His dream was real, but the timing and audience for sharing it were not right. Silence gives God room to work without interference. When you speak too soon, you risk inviting opposition from both people and spiritual forces. The enemy is always listening. He can't read your mind, but he hears your words. The moment you announce a breakthrough or a vision, the enemy begins working to counteract it. That's why Jesus often performed miracles and then instructed the healed person, tell no one. He knew that some miracles and revelations needed time to settle and grow before they could be openly declared. Silence also protects you from unnecessary pressure. When you speak openly about what God is doing, you open yourself to people's opinions, expectations, and judgments. If things don't happen on the timeline others expect, you may face criticism or doubt. That pressure can cause you to question God's plan or even force you to try to make things happen in your own strength, which can lead to disaster. Staying quiet allows you to remain focused on God's timing and not on human expectations. Silence is a test of trust. It takes faith to receive a promise from God and not immediately announce it. It requires discipline to keep quiet when you're excited or eager to see the promise fulfilled. But that discipline strengthens your faith. When you learn to be still and trust that God is working even when you don't see it, you build spiritual maturity. The ability to stay silent when God instructs you to do so is a mark of spiritual wisdom and growth. The power of silence is about alignment with God's timing and purpose. God's plan for you is not just about the promise, it's about the process. Speaking prematurely can disrupt that process. But when you guard your words and trust God's timing, you allow the seed He planted in you to grow and bear fruit at the right time. Silence becomes a shield, a weapon, and a tool that positions you for success. The most powerful moves of God often begin in silence and are completed through quiet obedience. Timing is one of the most critical factors in the fulfillment of God's plans for your life. It's not enough to receive a revelation or a promise from God. You need to understand the timing attached to it. There is a season for everything. And if you move too early or too late, you can sabotage the very thing that God intended to bless you with. Timing matters because God's plans are not just about the destination. They are also about the process that prepares you to handle the promise. When God reveals something to you, it doesn't necessarily mean it's time to act or speak. Sometimes God shows you a glimpse of your future, not so that you can immediately walk into it, but so that you can prepare for it. Premature exposure of a God-given plan can disrupt the process because when you share too soon, you invite unnecessary opposition and pressure. Not only can the enemy begin to work against what you've declared, but you may also find that the people around you are not ready to receive or support what God is doing in your life. Look at the life of David. He was anointed king while he was still a shepherd boy, but he didn't take the throne immediately. After Samuel anointed him, David went back to the fields. Why? Because the anointing was real, but the timing wasn't right. If David had tried to claim the throne immediately, he would have faced destruction. Instead, God took David through a process of preparation, battles, rejection, betrayal, and wilderness seasons to shape him into the king he was destined to become. The promise was true, but the process was necessary to align David's character, with his calling. Many times, the delay between the promise and the fulfillment is not a sign of denial. It's a period of preparation. God is working behind the scenes, setting things in order so that when the time is right, you'll be positioned to succeed. If you speak or act prematurely, you risk stepping out of alignment with God's timing. That's why Jesus was so strategic in his ministry. He didn't perform miracles or reveal himself openly until the appointed time. Even when his brothers pressured him to go public, he responded, "My time has not yet come." Jesus understood that the success of his mission was not just about what he was doing, it was about doing it in the right season. Timing matters because it protects you from unnecessary failure and frustration. If you step out before God opens the door, you'll find yourself striving in your own strength, and that often leads to burnout, disappointment, and confusion. You might have the right idea, but the wrong timing, and that can cause you to doubt the very thing God promised you. On the other hand, when you wait for God's timing, the doors that open are effortless. Resources, connections, and opportunities you need will align without manipulation or striving. Trusting God's timing requires humility and patience. It means accepting that you are not in control of the timeline. It means resisting the urge to announce or execute prematurely, even when you're excited or anxious. It's about surrendering the outcome to God and allowing Him to position you at the right time, in the right place, with the right people. So God is not just concerned with what you do, He's concerned with when you do it. Timing is not a small detail in God's plan. It's a critical part of the process. If you honor God's timing, you will see the fullness of His promise unfold in a way that exceeds your expectations. But if you rush ahead or lag behind, you risk missing the best version of what God intended for you. Timing matters because God's purpose is tied to His perfect timing. And when you align with it, nothing can stop the fulfillment of what He has spoken over your life. Words carry immense spiritual power. What you speak into the atmosphere has the ability to shape outcomes, attract blessings, or invite opposition. When God reveals something to you, whether it's a dream, a vision, or a promise, the words you choose to speak about it can either accelerate its fulfillment or give the enemy the opportunity to sabotage it. Spiritual warfare is not always about physical battles. More often, it takes place in the spiritual realm, where your words become weapons that either build or destroy. The Bible makes it clear that life and death are in the power of the tongue. What you speak matters, and it matters even more when it comes to the things God has entrusted to you. The enemy cannot read your mind, but he hears your words. When you speak prematurely about something God has revealed, you expose that plan to spiritual opposition. Satan operates on strategy and intelligence. He waits for clues, information, and openings, and your words can provide those openings. The moment you start speaking about your breakthrough, your promotion, or your next move, you give the enemy a map to target. The more detailed you are, the more ammunition you provide. This is why Jesus was intentional about telling people not to speak about certain miracles. He knew that publicizing the miracle too soon would attract unnecessary resistance and opposition from both spiritual and human forces. When you speak, you establish agreements in the spiritual realm. That's why the Bible says that confession is powerful, not just for salvation, but for activating faith and establishing spiritual realities. However, the same principle works in reverse. If you confess your plans prematurely or speak doubt and fear, you give the enemy access to interfere. When you tell people about a business idea, a relationship, or a ministry before it's spiritually secure, you allow room for criticism, jealousy, and even witchcraft to come against it. Some people, knowingly or unknowingly, release negativity and spiritual resistance through their words and thoughts. Consider the example of Job. When Job faced intense spiritual attacks, it wasn't just random suffering, it was targeted warfare. Satan had studied Job's life, looking for an opening gate. Job himself admitted, "What I feared has come upon me." Fear is activated through words. When you speak fear or uncertainty about what God is doing, you open the door for the enemy to manipulate the situation. That's why faith-filled silence is sometimes the greatest defense against spiritual attack. Coffee did it. If you don't speak it, the enemy can't act on it. The enemy thrives on information. When you talk too much about your plans, you give him the intelligence he needs to craft a strategy against. If you announce that you're starting a business, the enemy will begin working to create financial roadblocks. If you tell people you've met someone special, the enemy may stir up confusion or mistrust. If you declare that God is calling you into ministry, the enemy may send discouragement or false opportunities to distract you. Speaking prematurely gives the enemy a blueprint for attack. This is why discernment and wisdom are critical. Not every person around you is meant to know what God is doing in your life. Some people are simply not spiritually mature enough to handle what you share. Others are operating under jealousy or hidden agendas. But even close friends and family members can unknowingly speak words that plant seeds of doubt or confusion. Jesus himself did not reveal everything to his disciples. He had an inner circle for a reason. And even among them, he shared certain things only when the timing was right. Certain things only when the timing was right. Guarding your words is not about fear. It's about strategy. It's about understanding that there is a spiritual dimension to everything God does in your life. The devil cannot stop what God has ordained, but he can create enough disruption to delay or derail it if you give him the opportunity. That's why Proverbs teaches that a wise person holds their tongue. Silence is a form of spiritual warfare because it denies the enemy the information he needs to launch an attack. When God reveals something to you, your first response should be prayer, not public announcement. Ask God for wisdom and clarity about when and how to share what he's shown you. Some things are meant to be declared, but others are meant to be guarded until the time is right. Trust that God's timing includes the right moment to speak. Until then, let your silence become a shield. Your words have power, but so does your silence. In spiritual warfare, sometimes the greatest victory comes not from speaking, but from knowing when to keep your mouth shut. One of the hardest lessons to learn in life is that not everyone is meant to know what God is doing in you and through you. When God places a vision, a dream, or a promise in your heart, it's personal. It's between you and God first, and not everyone around you is qualified to handle that revelation. Sharing too much with the wrong people at the wrong time can lead to unnecessary opposition, misunderstanding, and even betrayal. God often works in silence and obscurity because he knows that revealing things too soon or to the wrong audience can compromise the outcome. When you receive a vision from God, the natural desire is to share it with the people closest to you. You want others to celebrate with you, to affirm you, and to get excited about what God is doing. But the reality is that not everyone is equipped to handle your vision. Fool. Some people simply lack the spiritual maturity to see beyond their own limitations. Others may be operating under jealousy, insecurity, or fear, and they may unintentionally or intentionally try to discourage you. Even people with good intentions can speak words that sow doubt or confusion. Joseph learned this lesson the hard way. When God gave him a dream about his future greatness, Joseph excitedly shared it with his brothers. Instead of celebrating with him, they were consumed with jealousy and plotted against him. Joseph's mistake wasn't hearing from God. It was assuming that his brothers would understand and support the dream, but they couldn't handle it. They weren't ready to see Joseph elevated because they were blinded by their own insecurities. So sharing the wrong thing with the wrong people at the wrong time cost Joseph years of pain and separation. God still fulfilled the dream. But Joseph's premature revelation created unnecessary conflict and suffering. There are people in your life who are not spiritually prepared to handle the weight of your calling. Some people can only see you through the lens of who you used to be, not who God is transforming you into. When you begin to grow, succeed, or step into a new level of anointing, those people may feel threatened or uncomfortable. They may try to pull you back into old habits or question whether you're really hearing from God. Their inability to see what God is doing in you can create friction, not because they hate you, but because they're not equipped to understand the new season you're entering. Jesus himself demonstrated the importance of selective revelation. He didn't share everything with everyone. He spoke to the crowds in parables, but he revealed the deeper truths only to his inner circle of disciples. Even among the disciples, Jesus often took Peter, James, and John aside for private revelations. He knew that not everyone could handle the weight of his mission. Before raising Jairus' daughter from the dead, Jesus removed the doubters from the room. He understood that faith and revelation require the right atmosphere, and sometimes that means removing the wrong people. Keeping certain things private is not about arrogance, it's about protection. Two, your vision is sacred, and it needs to be guarded until it's mature enough to withstand opposition. When a farmer plants a seed, he doesn't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. He protects it from harsh weather and pests until it's strong enough to withstand exposure. The same principle applies to the vision God gives you. Sharing too soon is like exposing a fragile seed to harsh conditions. It may never take root and grow properly. God will reveal to you who is meant to walk with you in certain seasons. Some people are only assigned to you for a chapter, not the whole story. Trying to force people to understand your calling when they're not equipped to do so will only frustrate you and delay your progress. When God separates you from certain people, it's not rejection, it's protection. He knows the hearts and motives of those around you better than you do. Trust that if someone is meant to be part of your journey, God will align them with you at the right time. Right? If they're not, then God's removal is a blessing, not a loss. Learning to guard your vision requires spiritual discernment and emotional maturity. It means resisting the urge to overshare or seek validation from people who aren't meant to understand your calling. When you protect what God has shown you, you give it room to grow and develop without interference. Trust that God knows when and how to bring the right people into your life to support your vision. Until then, stay quiet. Stay focused and let God reveal his plan in his timing. Not everyone is meant to know, and that's not rejection. It's wisdom. Premature exposure is one of the most dangerous threats to a God-given vision. When God reveals something to you, a dream, a calling, a promise, it's like planting a seed in the ground. That seed needs time to grow, develop roots, and establish itself in the soil before it can break through the surface and bear fruit. Exposing that seed too early through premature announcements, seeking validation, or trying to make things happen in your own strength can damage or even kill the vision before it has a chance to grow. Timing matters, but so does the process of protection and development that happens in silence. And a vision from God is delicate in its early stages. When God speaks to you about your future, it's often not fully formed yet. You might have a glimpse of the destination, but the details and the path to get there are still unclear. Speaking about it prematurely can open the door to confusion, doubt, and unnecessary opposition. People may question your vision, challenge your faith, or criticize your plan, not because the vision is wrong, but because it's not yet time for it to be revealed. When you expose the vision too early, you make it vulnerable to attack. The enemy cannot stop what God has ordained, but he can create enough distraction and resistance to slow you down or discourage you completely. Joseph's story is a perfect example of how premature exposure can lead to unnecessary hardship. God gave Joseph a powerful dream about his future influence and leadership. But Joseph, in his youthful excitement, shared the dream with his brothers, who were not spiritually or emotionally prepared to handle it. Their jealousy and resentment led them to betray Joseph, sell him into slavery, and plot to destroy him. The vision was real, but the exposure was premature. Joseph's brothers' reaction created a painful detour that could have been avoided if Joseph had guarded the vision until the right time. God still fulfilled his promise to Joseph, but the premature exposure created obstacles that were not part of God's original design. Premature exposure can also lead to pressure and striving. When you tell people about your vision before it's time, you create expectations. People begin to watch you, question you, and measure your progress. If the vision doesn't unfold as quickly as they expect, you may feel pressure to perform, to prove yourself, or to force the process. This can lead you to make decisions out of fear insecurity or impatience rather than faith and obedience. Trying to fulfill a God-given vision in your own strength will almost always lead to frustration and burnout. God's timing includes not only the fulfillment of the promise, but also the preparation of your heart, mind, and character to sustain it. Jesus demonstrated the importance of timing and protection throughout his ministry. Even when he performed miracles, he often instructed people not to tell anyone. This wasn't because he wanted to hide his power. It was because he knew that exposure at the wrong time would invite opposition from religious leaders and political authorities, which could interfere with his mission. Jesus understood that the right action at the wrong time could lead to sabotage and misunderstanding. He operated on God's timeline, not human expectation. Premature exposure can also lead to distortion. When you share your vision too soon, you open it up to interpretation and manipulation. That's why people may try to influence you, offer advice that pulls you away from God's original plan, or persuade you to take shortcuts. The enemy can even use well-meaning people to plant seeds of doubt or confusion. If you're not spiritually grounded, you may start questioning what God said or adjusting your course based on human feedback instead of divine instruction. Keeping the vision between you and God allows him to clarify the details and strengthen your faith without interference. Guarding your vision requires discipline and spiritual sensitivity. It means trusting God enough to let the vision remain hidden until he decides it's time for exposure. Just because you know where God is leading you doesn't mean you need to announce it. Silence is not inactivity. It's strategic preparation. When you keep the vision between you and God, you give it room to grow, deepen its roots, and mature, so that when it does emerge, it will be strong enough to withstand opposition. Premature exposure can kill a vision, not because the vision itself is wrong, but because the timing and the spiritual foundation are not yet complete. God's plans are not just about the promise. They're about preparing you to carry the promise with strength and integrity. What God has spoken over your life will come to pass, but only when the time is right and the foundation is secure. Trust the process, protect the vision, and resist the urge to announce it too soon. What God has prepared for you in secret will be revealed in due season. And when it's time, no opposition, no criticism, and no resistance will be able to stop it. Silence is not weakness. It is a strategic tool that protects the process God is working out in your life. When God gives you a vision, a dream, or a revelation, it is often in its most vulnerable stage. Just like a seed planted in the soil, it needs time to grow roots beneath the surface before it can withstand exposure to the elements. Speaking too soon or sharing too much can disrupt that process and open the door to unnecessary opposition, doubt, and confusion. Silence allows God to work in hidden places, away from the scrutiny of others and the attacks of the enemy. There is a reason why Jesus often withdrew from the crowds and instructed people to remain silent after he performed miracles. He understood the importance of protecting the process. Jesus knew that premature exposure could invite opposition before the appointed time. The Pharisees and religious leaders were already looking for reasons to accuse him. If his mission had been revealed too soon, it could have accelerated the resistance and altered the divine timeline. By choosing silence, Jesus was not hiding his power. He was protecting the purpose behind it. The purpose behind it. There is wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. When God is working something out in your life, the process is not always meant to be public. The most important growth happens in the hidden place. A tree develops its strongest roots underground where no one can see them. That's why it can withstand storms when they come. If the roots are deep enough, the tree will fall at the first strong wind. Your spiritual foundation is built in the hidden place through prayer, fasting, obedience, and trust. Speaking about what God is doing before that foundation is secure can weaken the entire process. Silence gives you room to grow without the pressure of external opinions or expectations. The enemy thrives on information. He cannot stop what God has planned for you, but he can attempt to delay or disrupt it by using your words against you. When you speak too soon about your vision, you give the enemy insight into your strategy. He begins to send distractions, obstacles, and opposition your way. People may start questioning your calling, criticizing your plan, or trying to insert their own ideas into what God told you. That's why some of the most powerful moves of God happen in secret before they are revealed publicly. Silence protects you from sabotage and confusion. Silence also allows God to refine and clarify the vision. Sometimes when God shows you something, you don't have the full picture yet. You may have an idea of where He's leading you, but the details are still forming. Speaking prematurely can cause you to act on incomplete information, leading to missteps and unnecessary struggle. When you remain silent and stay close to God, He can give you clarity and strategy without interference. Silence creates space for God to reveal the next step without the pressure of external voices influencing your decision. Joseph learned this lesson the hard way. When God gave him a dream about his future greatness, he shared it with his brothers, and their jealousy led to betrayal and suffering. If Joseph had kept the dream to himself, he might have avoided some of the pain he endured. God still fulfilled the dream, but Joseph's premature revelation created unnecessary opposition. On the other hand, Mary, the mother of Jesus, demonstrated the power of silence. When the angel revealed to her that she would give birth to the Son of God, she pondered these things in her heart. Mary didn't run to tell everyone what God had shown her. She guarded it in her spirit and allowed God to work out the details. Silence protects you from the need for human validation. When you speak about your vision too soon, you invite others to weigh in on it. And not everyone will respond with faith or encouragement. Some people will project their fears and limitations onto you. Others may try to discourage you because they can't see what God has shown you. Keeping it between you and God allows you to develop the confidence and spiritual maturity necessary to carry out the vision without relying on human approval. What God is birthing in you is not dependent on other people's understanding or acceptance. It's dependent on your obedience and trust in God's timing. Remaining silent is not about secrecy. It's about strategy. It's about understanding that there is a time for everything, and some things are meant to grow in the dark before they are revealed in the light. Silence gives you the strength to protect what God has planted, the patience to wait for His timing, and the wisdom to discern when to speak and when to remain quiet. When the time is right, God will open the door, create the opportunity, and make the announcement Himself. Until then, guard the vision, protect the process, and trust that silence is not inactivity, it is preparation. The most powerful manifestations of God's promises are often born in the quiet place, where faith is strengthened, vision is clarified, and character is refined. Silence is not weakness, it is spiritual protection. In conclusion, the power of silence is one of the most important spiritual disciplines when it comes to guarding the vision God has placed in your heart. Not everyone is meant to know what God is doing in you and through you. When you speak too soon, you expose the vision to unnecessary opposition, misunderstanding, and discouragement. Premature exposure can weaken or even kill the vision because it opens the door to confusion and pressure that you were never meant to face. That's why silence protects the process. It allows God to refine the vision, strengthen your foundation, and prepare you to carry the promise without interference. God works in hidden places for a reason. Just like a seed needs to develop roots underground before it can bear fruit, the vision God gives you needs time to grow and mature in the quiet. Speaking too soon can disrupt that process, but when you remain silent, you give God room to establish the foundation and align the right people, opportunities, and resources at the right time. Not everyone is meant to walk with you in every season, and not everyone is equipped to understand the calling on your life. Why you must be selective with what you share and with whom you share it. Jesus himself demonstrated the power of silence and strategic revelation. He knew when to speak and when to remain quiet because he understood that timing and atmosphere matter. Joseph's story reminds us that speaking about a God-given dream too soon can lead to betrayal and unnecessary suffering. But even in that, God's plan will still prevail. The key is to trust God's timing, not human validation. What God has shown you will come to pass, but it will happen in His way and His time. Your job is to protect the vision, guard the process, and trust God's strategy. Stay silent when necessary, remain focused on your assignment, and allow God to reveal His plan when the time is right. When God brings the vision to life, it will be undeniable, and no opposition, no misunderstanding, and no human interference will be able to stop it. Until then, stay quiet, stay faithful, and let God work behind the scenes. Silence is not weakness, it is spiritual wisdom and divine protection